Hello YouTube, it's Carrie here, and today we're going to be doing another recipe, but I also want to go over a little bit about how I make up some of my recipes. So one of the things that we have to do as weight loss surgery patients is really focus on the amount of nutrition in our food. And I knew I was going to be making something for lunch today, so I went to the freezer and looked at what was there to make something for lunch. For my protein, I decided to use the rest of the package of chicken tenders that I had from before. I just got these I think I got them from Trader Joe's. A lot of different grocery stores have these, and they're IQF, so they're individually frozen pieces of chicken, so you can take out as many as you need for the recipe. And there's about half a bag left, so I'm going to use that up today. I also need some vegetables. So what kind of vegetables are really good and nutritious? One of the most amazing vegetables that I love is artichokes, and I found frozen artichokes at Trader Joe's also in the frozen section. And these are also individually quick frozen, so you can take out of the bag however many you need and then seal the bag up again. Artichokes are really, really great because they're packed full of nutrition. They're also extremely high in fiber, which is really, really good to boost up your immune system. And how that works is that the soluble and insoluble fiber in these vegetables helps feed your gut microbiota and make it healthier, and that in turn really, really boosts your immune system. So all this stuff is really, really good for us. I'm also putting in spinach. So I have there was a really big, usually the frozen spinach that I buy comes in a smaller package, and you can put in however much you want, but this package was fairly large, so this is actually quite a huge amount of spinach. So I know I wanted to put these all together, and what I'm going to be doing is making a casserole that's focused on protein and produce. But when you make a casserole, you kind of need some sauciness in there. So for the sauce, I'm going to be doing a bechamel, and I'm going to show you how to do that. A bechamel is basically a white sauce that is started off with something called a roux. A roux, R-U-X, is done with a combination of flour and butter. Yes, there is flour in this recipe. There is so much other stuff in this recipe, including good protein and lots of fiber. So the small amount of flour that is in here is going to be mediated by all the other ingredients. So it's not as if you're eating like a piece of bread where all of a sudden you're going to get this big glycemic reaction and it's going to affect your blood sugar level and make you hungry later. Because there's so much fiber in this dish, it'll mediate the absorption of the little amount of flour that is actually going to end up in a single portion. What happens with a roux is that flour has thickeners in it, but they're generally inhibited. So when you cook it with a fat, it changes the structure of the starches in the flour, allowing them to become like a thickening agent. So that's how that works. And a lot of gravies are started off this way, and a lot of different sauces are started this way. The base ingredient of a bechamel is milk, and you can use whatever kind of milk you want. I have not tried this with like almond milk or soy milk or anything like that, so I go with dairy milk. But I'm not sure. That might work, but I haven't tried it, so I'm not going to suggest it to you. I'm also going to be putting some cheese in this dish because everything is better with a little bit of cheese. I love cheese. So I'm going to be mixing in some of this Italian blend shredded cheese into the sauce to make it cheesy, and then I'm also going to be topping it with some of this Parmesan cheese so that we get a nice crusty yummy top, and we get that nice like caramelized cheese thing happening on top. That's so awesome. I have some seasonings here as well. I am going to be seasoning my bechamel with salt and pepper, as well as some garlic powder. And I'm also going to be putting in some of this Montreal chicken spice. I smelled it, and it smells pretty good. It smells like it'll go with all of the other ingredients as well. So that's my full ingredient list of what I'm going to be using today. And away we go. There's something that I want to add about recipe creation. the way that I do it, like this is a casserole that I'm doing today. So I want to pick a protein. I want to pick at least 1 or 2 veggies, and then there's going to be a sauce that kind of brings it all together. And you can do this various ways. I personally like using bechamel because it makes everything delicious and creamy, and it lends this sort of like very comfort food type texture to the dish. I also like to put a topping of some kind, and that could be a host of different things. If you're in maintenance and you want to use breadcrumbs, that's all good. Or if you've got like, you know, you're not as focused on the carbs, or you are more physically active and you can handle those carbs without the weight gain, then that's all good. If you want to use something different, you can also use ground nuts as a topping, and cheese is always awesome. So, you know, cheese. Right, so basically proteins, so, you know, beef, fish, you know, even vegetarian proteins like tofu, you can do. And think about the types of ingredients that you're using and the kinds of cuisines that sort of bring those ingredients together, because then you'll find the right sauces and seasonings to go with those dishes. Very often you can look up recipes on different websites like All Recipes, or you can look on Yumly with certain ingredients, and it'll bring up a whole bunch of different recipes. And from there, you might not want to include all of the different types of starches that are in those recipes, but the other ingredients like the seasonings and the sauces, so like if it's a tomato base or if it's a creamy base, you can look at those types of ingredients and pull together those things into your own dish. And that's generally how I like to cook. I look and I see what ingredients are good at the store. I buy quality ingredients, I bring them home, and then I pull them together in ways that make sense for the types of ingredients that I have. And it's good to have fun with cooking, and even some of the mistakes, like you learn from those mistakes, so don't be afraid to experiment with food. We are going to put the butter into the pan and melt that butter until it is completely melted. Now that our butter is melted, we're about ready to add our flour. And there we go. So you want to just mix this around. And you want to make sure that your heat is turned down to medium-low so that this doesn't burn and your butter doesn't burn and your flour doesn't burn. The darker you take this roux, the less thickening capability it will have. But you do want to cook it long enough to get the raw flour taste out of the roux. And that'll be just a couple of minutes. So this recipe has half butter and half flour in it. I have 2 tablespoons of each, and we are ready to go. You want to add cold milk to this, and you're adding it a little bit slowly there and mixing. You're going to see it start to sort of bubble and thicken up immediately, and then slowly add your milk. When you are making roux, you either need hot roux and cold milk, or cold roux and hot milk. So make sure that your milk is cold from the fridge. And we're going to add in the rest of this milk, and then turn the heat up to get this bubbling. So you'll notice as soon as it started to bubble up like that, I turned the heat down. So I have the heat now on about medium-low. And we're going to let this cook and thicken up for about 10 minutes. Right now our sauce is nice and thick. As you can see, the bubbles are kind of coming up slow and molten. And we are going to start adding our seasoning to this. I generally use a fair amount of salt because there's a lot of vegetables in here. Salt is more a matter of salt and potassium balancing. So if you've got a lot of veggies in your dish, it can take a decent amount of salt. I'm also putting pepper in here. I'm going to add some garlic powder. And then stir all this around. And then the next thing I'm going to add in here is the cheese. I like cheese. So adding cheese sort of makes it a Mornay sauce or a cheese sauce. I'm gonna put in, you know, a decent amount because cheese, that seems like about right. And then we're gonna turn the heat off and just allow it to mix and melt in until we get a gooey, delicious cheese sauce. Look at that. That is gonna make our protein and veggies taste awesome. Before we use it, it's a good idea to test the seasoning, and this is perfect. Yum. But one thing to keep in mind when you are making a casserole with frozen vegetables and frozen proteins is that you want to make sure that all of those things are really defrosted and dried out as much as possible before we assemble our casserole. Otherwise, it will add a lot of moisture content to the casserole and it might turn out a little bit watery. So definitely make sure all of your veggies are defrosted and your meats, and drain off excess liquid on the meats. Damp them with a towel, like a paper towel or a kitchen towel. Of course, if you use the kitchen towel, throw that in the wash. Don't use that for your dishes or anything. You don't want any salmonella or cross-contamination issues going on. For the spinach, frozen spinach is notoriously watery. You really have to squeeze the heck out of it. It's really actually quite helpful doing this in a kitchen towel because you could ball it up in the towel and just squeeze it. And all that moisture will come out. I will show you how to do that. But even with the other things like the mushrooms, there's a lot of water in those mushrooms, so you want to make sure that all of that excess moisture is drained off so we don't have a watery casserole. The water, it will dilute the thickness of the bechamel when it bakes, and you won't get that really nice, hearty, thick texture. Show you how to drain off this spinach. I just popped the frozen spinach into a bowl and stuck it in the microwave for a couple minutes to make sure all of the ice crystals were defrosted, and then I'm putting it in a kitchen towel. I've got another bowl underneath. Normally I would do this over the sink. So we're gonna ball it up like that and then just squeeze. And you see how much water is coming out of there? That's all water that would have diluted our sauce. So we want to get it all out. And I'm going to use this kitchen towel actually to get the water out of all the vegetables, because if you've gotten your towel dirty, you may as well continue to use it. Again, just twist and squeeze like that. And it's funny that huge, of course, this is a thing with spinach, that seemingly huge package comes down into like a little small ball. Alright, so that looks like most of the water is out. Use that elbow grease, and that's like a lot right there. So I'm going to go ahead and dump that. And then we'll open up our towel, and you can see this little lump of spinach inside. Ah, look how perfect. Here we go. Here's our lump of dehydrated frozen spinach. So that is not going to add a lot of moisture to our dish right now. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my other veggies. Porcini mushrooms, the water from them is actually quite great, so like it has so much flavor. You can save that for another dish or a soup or anything else, or if you're making gravy. And again, you can see a lot of water coming out of this too, and I've already squeezed these actually, but the towel method works really, really great. You can also use dried porcinis for these or any other type of mushrooms. If you are using fresh mushrooms, I would suggest to saute them first. To sort of cook them so they don't get a spongy texture when they bake in the oven. And then we're going to just take that off the towel and into the bowl. Whoop. And like I said, there's a lot of different ingredients you can use for this. The last thing we're going to empty this first. Boom. And then the last one we're going to do is the artichokes, which seem to be fairly dry to begin with, so there shouldn't be too much water in these ones. If you want to, you could use canned artichokes or marinated artichokes as well. And you don't have to use artichokes. Like I said, this is all about making up stuff from the stuff that you have on hand and your favorite veggies and stuff that you find at the farmer's market or is on sale at the grocery store. Becoming more flexible with the way that we do food planning and meal planning and the way that we use food is a great thing. you know, because you never know next time you go to the grocery store when something is gonna all of a sudden be like, you know, cauliflower like $9 a head I've seen, which is insane. So if you had something planned to use cauliflower, and cauliflower is very expensive, there are other things that you could substitute in like that. For instance, something like broccoli or other types of greens and vegetables, or even zucchini. Chicken has been defrosted and the water has been drained off, but we want to make sure it's really dry. So I'm blotting it with a towel, and then I'm actually going to cut this up into smaller chunks. Another thing about that is that it also allows you to distribute the protein throughout your portions a little bit more evenly. At this point, I'm going to be adding some seasoning to my chicken. So I have some McCormick's Montreal chicken seasoning, but you can really use whatever you want. You could use garlic powder or anything else, or you can completely skip this step if you feel that your bechamel already has enough flavor in it. It really is optional. We are ready to assemble our dish. I am going to preheat the oven, and we're going to be baking this at 375 degrees. To get started, I'm actually going to stir my spinach into the bechamel so that it's distributed nicely. And we're just going to sort of mush it around like this. Pretty simple stuff. Mush it, mush it, mush. Okay, then we're going to get our baking dish out. I'm actually going to put the chicken in first. Oop. And then I'm going to be putting in the veggies, artichokes and mushrooms. And then I'm just going to toss this around a little bit so that it's distributed nicely. And if you see a proliferation of too much chicken in one spot or not enough mushrooms, you can just move that around however you like. Alrighty, this looks about even to me. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to plop on our spinach and bechamel mixture. And when this bakes in all together, what you will see is that it's going to sort of melt into the ingredients on the bottom so that you don't really have to worry about layering too much. There will be dispersion of the ingredients when you bake it. So I'm just going to spread it around like this. Oh, it's already looking good. I'm excited. Because my hands have chicken on it, I have been washing my hands a lot. Every time you handle chicken, you want to wash your hands before handling anything else in the kitchen. I don't think I worried about it when I handled that because that is just going to be washed right away. But you want to be a little bit tuned into that so that you don't have any cross-contamination for issues like salmonella, particularly when you're working with something like raw chicken. Okay, so we are ready for our final step before this goes into the oven. So I have washed my hands and they are clean now. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of Parmesan over the top. This is going to be baking for about 40 minutes or so, 30-40 minutes. You'll be able to see when I've put it in the oven how the look of it is going to change. You want to make sure that the chicken pieces are small enough so they are going to cook evenly. That's another reason why you want to make sure that the chicken is approximately similar thickness and size of pieces so that it bakes evenly. And you don't get like one piece that's really, really thick that might be raw in the middle. Chicken is something you just don't mess around with when it comes to stuff like that. So right now everything is even and we are ready to go in the oven. Actually, one last step I'm going to do before putting it in the oven, and this is totally optional, and that is just drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil on top. That kind of helps the way that the top of it bakes. I find you get a bit of a crispier layer on top when you add a little bit of olive oil. Alright, so my oven is not quite finished preheating, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm just going to add on a little bit of extra time when I do the final timing for my casserole. So this is what it looks like right now, and here we go into the oven. So right now our dish is bubbling away in the oven, and I want to talk to you a little bit about recipe creation. So one of the things that I often tell people to do when they start thinking about making their own recipes is think about protein, produce, and the type of cuisine that they like. So a great thing to do is make yourself a list. In one column, put protein, in another column put produce, and in another column put cuisine, sort of like this here. So you here under produce, I have shrimp, chicken, beef, fish, salmon, pork tenderloin. I have all different types of vegetables here, and I have different types of cuisine. And what you can do is see what you have around and see what you like, or use this as a shopping list and pick up different types of seasonings and ingredients that go with certain types of cuisines. So for Thai, it might be lemongrass and coconut milk. For Mexican, you can use different seasoning packets. One thing to watch out for in seasoning packets is maltodextrin, because if you are sugar sensitive, maltodextrin can, at least for me, it trips my dumping syndrome. So I have to really, really watch out for that ingredients and things. The other thing that I read recently was that it can also affect your microbiome, and you want really nice, healthy gut bacteria to help you digest and absorb all the nutrients in these nutrient-dense foods. The other thing about different types of seasonings is a lot of the spices used in cooking have really, really great health benefits. They have ability to lower blood pressure or to even out blood sugar. They also have a lot of different vitamins and nutrients in them, like micronutrients. So what you can do is like see what you have and pick two and pick one of these. So for instance, let's say I do beef with bok choy and mushrooms, and that sort of sounds like it would be really good for Chinese, right? So I could do a stir fry with that. Another combination might be shrimp, tomatoes, and zucchini. That sounds like it would be really good for Italian or even Mexican. So you can play around with this and make your own combinations, and in this way sort of start to teach yourself how to use food in new ways and how to work with quality ingredients that you make sure to have on hand, and that way you will always have something healthy to make in the house, and you start to teach yourself the skills of how to cook for the rest of your life. And this will help you in the long run because you won't be relying so much on stuff that you get from out of the house that's already pre-made, either restaurant food or pre-prepared food that's sold in the grocery store. Alright, so it's about, I think 10 minutes left of our cooking time, so let's take a look in the oven. It smells really good. Yum! Alright guys, so this is ready to go. Look how yummy that looks. It smells actually really, really awesome. So I got myself a bite. Let's do the taste test. Yeah, it was really yummy. Oh my god. Healthy comfort food. The artichoke is kind of sweet. The spinach just adds so much deliciousness, especially mixed in with that bechamel with the cheese. The mushrooms add sort of like a savory umami flavor. I'm gonna try some of this chicken too. Totally yummy goodness. The top is all nice and brown. And kind of like chewy, crispy baked cheese. Totally yum. Let me know if you try it. Give me your recipe ideas of anything that you want to try. Try doing the exercise that I showed you with writing those columns. And then even if you take like one of the proteins, a couple of the veggies, and the type of cuisine, pop that into Google and see what kind of recipes come up. And then you can work with those recipes to make them more weight loss surgery friendly. And that's how you can make a delicious casserole from stuff that you have on hand. Anyhow, have a great week, everybody. And remember, weight loss surgery is not a tool until you learn how to use it. Bye-bye.